we're about 7 minutes past the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and get started, and Bob can listen to the recording to catch up to speed. I struggle with putting out an agenda, and at 1:45 today, I was still trying to formulate it, and I finally said to hell with it. What I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about what I know about why we got started, and this is from our president and where we are to go. I believe that the president's main goal, and no other, was to get us to do something about the situation that the leadership of NaCCRA had let come into existence with the state of Washington and the state of Illinois. And I think that was the main goal. And I think at this point, we have almost solved the state of Washington. And I want to, at this point, I want to let Jack bring the rest of the committee up to date exactly on where we are with the state of Washington at this point. Jack, if you would, please. And by the way, I was totally unfair to Jack. He found out I was going to do this to him about 30 seconds ago.
Well, I think Frank is pretty conversant with it as well, and may have different nuances. But I did put together, because it was getting a little complicated to follow everything, I've put up on the NaCCRA website a dues and membership committee webpage, and I think you all have links to that. And that includes both discussion that was internal to the state of Washington and the resulting draft agreement that they call their governing body the executive committee for some reason. But anyway, that their executive committee, as I understand it, has now adopted. So the next step then is to take that agreement that's been worked out with Washington to the NaCCRA board, but by way of this committee. So the agreement was posted on the website so that people could review it in advance of this meeting, and then if this group sees it as reasonable, they can recommend it to the NaCCRA board, which will be meeting on February 3rd. Is that your understanding, Frank?
Yeah, as far as I know.
Jack, I think it's very reasonable, and I would like to, for us to move that to the board right now, if I could have a motion on it.
Well, if nobody else will move it, I'll make a motion that we move that to the board. Frank, are you just as a direct question though, because I don't want to bulldoze this thing, are you personally opposed to what we have?
As far as I know, when they left the committee rooms, there were still some changes that they were looking at, and I must honestly admit that I have not seen the document with the amendments that were proposed and how it exactly reads. So I guess I'm caught at this point until I've read it.
Frank, I'm not asking this committee to approve that agreement. I'm only asking it to, let's move it to the NaCCRA board and let them either approve or recommend changes at this point.
I'm not sure what doing. I don't quite understand.
Okay, the NaCCRA, the Washington State people have been massaging this, and they've moved it to their board, and I'm asking that we take the same document that exists and send it to our NaCCRA board, and because they have a meeting coming up in a week or so where they can officially see it and either recommend some changes, but get them in the loop with the Washington group. That's all I'm asking to do, is to move it from Jack.
I have no problem because, I have no problem because it is subject, obviously, to some things that are going to be happening in Washington downstream. So that's fine.
Well, okay.
Can I consider that a second?
Well,
I'd rather not second on it, but go ahead.
Okay. We have a second and a motion and a second to move the agreement that Jack and the state of Washington has been working on to the NaCCRA board for them to officially look at it and either agree with it or make some changes and send it back to Washington. Any discussion at this point?
It's Jack. I'm just wondering if, I'm a little troubled that the group hasn't reviewed it. I mean, because I think we shared that the availability of the draft with the whole group, and I think the board, it would be reasonable that the board's going to want to know, does the dues of membership committee agree with it or not, or because otherwise we risk that somebody who hasn't been involved and hasn't given it much thought says, well, I think it ought to be $500 for a state, and that ought to be enough, and they amend it. Do we really want that to occur at the board level?
Okay, I don't have any problem with it. I think it's fine to send it to the NaCCRA board as a recommendation from this committee and let them massage it, because they are ultimately the ones that's got to make the agreement with the state of Washington, not this committee. All we were asked to do was to hammer out a recommendation for them to begin with. And I have no problem in sending it to them as our recommendation for them as a starting point.
Well, we certainly want the Washington person on our committee to have read it and say that it's okay. We can't go in just half-hearted. If I understand, Frank hasn't taken the time yet to read it, so I'm wondering if we can act.
All right, let's do it this way, Jack. Since sometimes people have problems getting on the website where it is, I've had no problem going right to it. Let's let all the members read it and give you a thumbs up. Yes, we agree with it going to the board, and we recommend that they take it as a starting point, or no, we don't. And then when you get it from all the members, just send it to the president of the board. And I can tell you right up front, I have read it, and I agree with it as a good starting point, and we should approve it for our board.
Yeah, I know of no reason why Frank wouldn't enthusiastically endorse it. So I think that that's a good solution. We need a deadline. Do we want to ask them to, today's Monday?
Yeah, let's get it done by the end of the week.
No problem.
Is that sufficient time, you think, for Jack, for you to get it to the board?
Well, it'll be on the agenda is going to go out sooner than that, but it'll
when's the agenda going out?
Well, it'll probably go out later today because I'm just waiting for Bob Nicholson. Bob Nicholson is the one who's responsible for the agenda. So,
well, he can make a revision after he gets it. Let's say do it on Wednesday then.
Yeah, well, that'd work. Is that too fast for everybody?
No, that's fine. I have no problem. I just want, Jack, the only thing I'm looking at is that I know that at the executive committee there were some minor changes, but I just want to make sure that I'm comfortable with them all.
Okay, yes, all those changes were made. they changed, for example, before it said that the dues would be what is set between NaCCRA and NaCCRA Washington. They wanted to change it to be that the dues will be set by NaCCRA and NaCCRA Washington. And there were places where the words NaCCRA Washington lacked the hyphen between them. There were that kind of thing. So, sure, go ahead. Yeah, those changes, I believe, have all been made.
Okay, I think the primary one was with regard to the who was going to be able to make the dues changes.
Bennett, have you been following this process?
Absolutely, unequivocally. Yeah. I mean, obviously, a lot of activity in Washington State, in the last week or so. There's some more operational, logistical things on that particular topic, but yeah, I mean, I'm certainly comfortable, kind of the thought process for getting things before the board next week.
Yeah. So why don't we just say that everybody looks at it by Wednesday and emails me, and then then if everybody says that we recommend it, we can use that language. If all we're doing is submitting it with reservations, we can do that.
Okay, you got mine. I recommend it.
Okay.
Yeah, Bennett, just for 1 second, you say that there are some questions with regard to the details, I guess, of...
No, I don't want to... no, let me clarify or confirm what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just operational issues related to the membership form for the billing, not the... So that's what I'm referring to.
Oh, okay, I do recall that was... but that isn't a part of the letter anyway, I don't believe.
No. I meant operational.
Yeah, okay. I thought maybe there was something there that was still going on. Okay.
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay, got that one out of the way. As we continued through this process, we approved one item, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this came from Jack Snyder, that we picked one item that we could hang our hat on, that we were going to advocate for and go for approval, and that was financial transparency and all the ramification of it. We have not heard back. That was presented to the board as a recommendation. We haven't heard back from them yet on that.
Charlie, I think that they sort of improved it in concept. Gene Hurley got off on whether some things about the Older Americans Act that weren't really central to it, but she had also asked that we share the idea with Leading Age, and that was done. So Leading Age is looking at this. So it's really, we've moved the ball to the next level, which would be that we would see if Leading Age would back it or not. That will not be determinative, but the board certainly didn't object to that, and there was no objection to the concept, just to the mechanics. And I think that just was, the mechanics weren't as well understood by the person objecting as they might have been.
Yeah, I think one of the things we're going to find on this is that Leading Age, I have a feeling, will say that they support us on this. But you'll only get support out of the national providers from those who now have residents on their board, and that's about 35% of all the CCRCs. The other 65% probably will not want to support it, and they'll offer you all kind of good reasons, but the main reason is losing their slush fund. So it's a long road. It's a good one to take, but if everybody thought we were getting a simple one, it certainly is not a simple one. Because I'll tell you, with a good, friendly atmosphere, we worked on this for 2 years in Florida, and we are not there yet.
Yeah, I think you've misconstrued though what we're asking. We're not asking them to give up their slush fund. We're not asking them to put residents on board. All we're asking is that entry fee contracts have the same financial guarantee that applies to annuities under the laws in every single state. Each individual state has laws. Those laws are all identical, and we're asking that entry fee contracts simply have that same protection.
I didn't mean to allude to the fact that I was asking for residents on the board. We were not doing that in Florida either. We were doing exactly what you're saying, protecting those entrance fees, and we're a long way to go yet after 2 years of hard work on it. Yeah,
if you go state by state, you're going to fail.
Yeah, I think so too.
That's why we're doing it through Leading Age.
Yeah.
Okay. All the states have to do is to bring the entry fee in under their existing annuity law and do it as a technical amendment. It's done now.
Yeah. Now we come to a point that we've walked around a little bit, but we haven't answered it. And before I talk about it, I want to say that I've read. Walt, are you here today?
Yes, I am.
I've read your 3 papers you published. One on policies and procedures. One on the bylaws,
and one on standing rules.
Yeah, and one on standing rules. And I don't have a problem with that. If I was doing it, I might have done it a little different. I've always had a policies and procedures book, though, so there's no problem with that. But in any case, we've got to address one item, I think, and I'd like to do that now. And let the NaCCRA board put the words in the bylaws, but I think this committee has got to recommend that any individual, man or woman, that supports NaCCRA's mission, be it a family member, be it a provider, like we've got numerous providers that are life members of NaCCRA, or be it a lawyer friend that just thinks he ought to do something good for elders because his mom and daddy live in a community like this, or there's all kind of reasons, but if they support what we're trying to do and want to join the organization, I think they should be able to join it with full membership rights. And that includes, we ought to eliminate that restriction that you have to live in a CCRC to be on the board. And I'll tell you why for that. One of the retired vice presidents of Leading Age, in fact, the senior vice president until Sheriff Phillips come along and replaced her, Susan Weiss, is one of the best supporters of residents and NaCCRA that I have ever known. And I don't know that she would serve on our board, but if she could, she would be a most ideal person to be a board member on NaCCRA. So what I'd like to see is this committee approve the concept of any person that supports NaCCRA and its mission be allowed to join as a member and have full membership rights. Comments?
I think you ought to extend that to bring in any that are currently there as associate members or whatever we call them, that they would automatically become without, because a lot of them are life members.
This is Jack. I've also put up a web page for this. I'll share these pages again with the committee. They were shared before, but people may not have realized what was there. When this came up before, I knew I wanted Liz Tidyman very much involved. And at that time, Dan Seeger and Judy Moss led the opposition, supported by Gene Hurley and some other people who are also now off the board. And so they insisted on treating people like Liz Tidyman as second class. So in the work that we've been doing ever since we met in Springfield and again in Boston, we've been trying to rectify that. Right now, the proposal reads that any individual who supports NaCCRA's mission may become a member upon application and payment of such dues as the board determines. And that would be full membership, including possibility of being on boards. And I would propose as a motion now that this group support those words. And we have a motion that we believe that we support the work of the Bylaws Committee, which has recommended that membership be any individual who supports NaCCRA's mission may become a member upon application and payment of such dues as the board determines.
All I'm doing, Jack, is I would like to make it retroactive.
Do we really need to make it retroactive? Because I can tell you, when the executive director and the director of operations of the community where I live joined as life members, there were no restrictions in the bylaws then, and they had every right that any other member had at the time, and I don't know that we can change that.
Well, we can't rectify the wrongs of the past, although we can apologize for them. And I think with Dan and Judy, absenting themselves, we've become a more open organization. But Frank, can I construe that as a second to the motion, or how would you do that?
I want to amend the motion so that those people who have life memberships currently, but are in what this odd associate or friend or whatever it is that they're called, become full-bodied members. I'm speaking particularly about Liz, obviously, and I want to make sure that she doesn't have to come back in and get another membership. That's why I'm saying I would like to add retroactively.
I'll put some words together that does that. That's certainly the intent. Because I've been motivated by the example of her and Susan Weiss and others right from the beginning. And it was, if you listen to the discussion back in 2013, you'll see that it was very divided, very animated, and the results have been very unfortunate for NaCCRA.
Yeah, I'm with you, Jack. I just want to make sure that we don't just compound misunderstanding by not reflecting that people who have been and can be very active. We want to cross our I's and cross our T's and dot our I's, or Liz will notice the missing dot. That's for sure. So let's do that. The motion with the second. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Bennett, do you have a problem with this?
No, not as constructed, no, sir.
Okay. Any other discussion on it?
Yeah, I endorse it very strongly. I think it's a great thing to do. I didn't get it done in North Carolina, and I regret it to this day.
Well, there's a fear among some residents on this. I can tell you in my community when the executive director and director of operations joined and we let it happen, we had 4 or 5 members to resign right then because they were not going to be in membership with those crooks.
Well, I mean, that's the issue. And when it was discussed in 2013, it divided 50-50. I think if you take any representative group of residents, it goes 50-50, because what they're afraid is that the providers will just take over a resident organization, and they feel they need a resident organization. Of course, providers have taken the same position on their boards and said, we don't want residents to be allowed on our boards because the residents then would just take over. And so there's this unfortunate tension, which ought not to be there, between providers and those they serve, and we've got to work within Leading Age to change that mentality and that mindset, because the industry is destroying itself by being opposed to its own customers, and future customers are figuring that out and saying, to hell with that. So I think we're going to be a big help to the industry. We haven't heard from Jack Snyder. I think he's the only one who's on the call who, as a member, who hasn't commented on this.
Well, I've been listening very intently to the conversation here, and I just think about what could happen, which is a bad way to probably be thinking about it. But if you want to take control of anything, you put in I can see why the CCRC management says we don't want any residents on here, because they could try to take control. And I think we have to look at, well, enough members of Leading Age get on this, they could take control. And so I'm weighing through that and would welcome somebody to comment on it. I can see the positive sides that you're talking about, Jack, and I can also see somewhere down the road where they say, well, let's take control of this. Well, Leading Age could say, let's take control of this organization, or let's start our own.
Okay,
an item in the bylaws, in the section on the board itself, and say that the membership of the board, the majority of the board, exclude anyone outside of residency.
No, I don't think we want to go there. I think we have a mechanism. We already, because even if you have a bunch of residents who are provider supporters, we had that happen. Dan Seeger packed the board with people who supported him, and Walt Boyer's nominating committee, which was to check and balance that, allowed it to happen. I think Walt learned his lesson from that and likely would not allow that to occur again. But the issue of control is always an issue with a board, and the board has to be vigilant to ensure that the organization remains true to its mission. That's one of the constraints on board membership, and should be something that people do. We shouldn't allow a single individual or a single group of individuals or a single interest group to pack the board, as was done with the appointment of two friends of Dan's from the time when he lived at Medford Lees. That should not be allowed to be repeated, but we have to be vigilant to that. We can't do it in our governing documents. It requires competent leadership who are alert to that and who do what needs to be done to prevent it.
Well, I would agree with that, but there's no process unless you put a limit of the number of Leading Age executive, or however you want to define it, can be part of the NaCCRA board.
But
and if you put a quantity,
the board has control of the membership. If the residents on the board vote the Leading Age executives in, then that's their own problem. I mean, they did it. They killed their own organization. That would be, I hope that would never happen, but that sort of thing does happen.
But Jack, maybe I'm wrong, but and I don't know what you're going to do when you rewrite the bylaws, but my understanding of them at the present time is that any member of the NaCCRA and the members all need to be set a ballot, as it were, for board members. It isn't just up to the board to nominate and elect for its own self, your protection basically, unless you're going to rewrite the bylaws to eliminate member voting for the board, then as long as if some of us feel that somebody is being put on there just with the purpose of taking over the management of it, the residents, the members of the large group of people can unite and basically throw them off the board. So I don't have a great deal of problem unless the bylaws are going to change to the effect that the board is going to self-select its new members, which is the case that where we have residents on the board. We have 3 residents on the board, but they are self-appointed by our existing board, and the problem with that is that you do not have any resident control over the people who represent you supposedly on the board. So it's a lot is in how the board is written.
No, I understand that. You're comparing Horizon House, where you do have an active resident membership group interacting. What we did in the past, we had a general meeting, nominating committee presented a slate. Most of the members at the meeting were the people who lived in the CCRC where the meeting took place. And so, and they were not an unbiased group. They were a coordinated group. So it wasn't that we had membership. So what we did was to reconstruct the nominating committee to be comprised of the state presidents. All the state presidents who wanted to participate were on the nominating committee. The difficulty was that and I'll let Walt speak to what happened when Dan packed the board, but I believe that what happened was that the state presidents weren't as active as they're becoming now, and Walt went along with Dan and just supported that slate. But the check and balance is that there's a nominating committee comprised of the state presidents, because they are the ones who are most conversant with new talent coming up that might be able to populate the board. But Walt, why don't you recall how was it that Dan was able to pack the board?
Well, actually, at the time he was doing that, Peter was still in charge of the nominating committee.
Oh, okay.
And fortunately, his wife became very ill, and he was ill because of his.
Well, I apologize. I thought that at the meeting in Springfield that you were the one who made those nominations.
Well, I made those nominations on his behalf because he couldn't make the meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
It was in his CCRC, right?
Didn't take over until after Dan and Judy resigned.
Oh, okay.
I very arbitrarily took over and sent an email to Ruth and sent an email to Peter saying, I recognize the situation. I'm going to start taking over this and handling it. And that's when I took over the nominating committee.
We need that nominating committee really to be a strong force. That is the force that protects the mission and the selection of the board.
Yeah.
Under our current bylaws, but also under the revisions that we've been looking at, because we tried having the general membership vote electronically. Didn't happen. You can send emails out till the cows come home. The people don't vote, and so then whoever's at that meeting governs the thing. So we need that intermediate structure of the nominating committee so that people are engaged in protecting the integrity of the board and of the mission.
Yep. No, I agree. It can be done that way. Yep.
No, and I agree, the nominating committee, but, and I'm not sure how your bylaws are going to end up being written, but there should always be the potential, if there is a strong feeling, and I will agree with you, Jack, people won't vote unless there is a for some reason, a blanket type of problem that showed up, and some people decide they're going to uprise against it. So, as long as we have those steps in between, I don't see why we can't. Because from my viewpoint, and I think from yours, someone like Liz would be a very powerful person on the board if, in fact, it turned out that, and we might be able to get some people who have some talents that don't show up so often when you limit yourself to only those people who are resident members. Some of the best people you can get from, say, the accounting or legal profession, and also possibly from the actuarial world, who knows. I think you can get them in then and have a board that is more representative of what you want to do as an organization.
Yeah, I could give you a specific example. Catherine Pearson and A.V. Powell were
right.
Ruth had offered to put them on the board. Then this Dan and Judy group said no, they couldn't be on the board. We had to withdraw the invitations. Catherine Pearson,
wow,
A.V. Powell, and it put egg on our face.
You're darn right. I didn't realize that, Jack, but Catherine would be one of.
And what happened is that in order to come up with the number of board members we needed, we brought in people who don't have the background. So
no, to not get people like Catherine and take advantage of it. And I don't happen to know Powell, but there are other people that I've heard and or know of who could be, and you really miss something if you don't take advantage of those opportunities, because I think people would find being on a national board of this would be of interest to outside people who could really bring some positive influence to us.
As I sit here and listen to this conversation, it made something jump out at me that this committee may want to look at meeting or so down the road. If you are the mind that residents should be your voter, then I would offer a suggestion that we take a look at how Florida has organized. It being such a long and distant state, it was split into 8 regions, and on their board they have 8 regional directors that take care of the CCRCs in their region. And when it comes time to vote on anything, each of the chapters in those regions are awarded delegates based on the number of residents they have. And those delegates vote for whatever is to be voted on. It has worked extremely well. Now, the United States is considerably bigger than Florida, but it could also be subdivided into a number of regions, and we could have a director in charge of each of the regions and follow a similar process if we wanted to that works well. But that just came to mind as I was listening to that discussion. I'm glad I brought it up now. I think the consensus that I heard is that we want to let everybody join, but we want some controls on how you get on the board. Well, I really thought we had them, but if we don't, that's very easy to accomplish. But I still think we need to let anybody that supports our mission become a member of the organization. Because, believe it or not, folks, there's a lot of Catherine Pearsons and A.B. Powells and Susan Weisses throughout the United States. Even some people that just like to pick up a cause that they see worthy. And there's two groups that you can't find more worthy, and that's pet dogs and old folks. And I don't mean to be putting us all in the same group, but that's two categories that draw an awful lot of attention. If you don't believe it, look at the SPCA, and here we are, NaCCRA, trying to get as strong as they are. You think we are ready for a motion to give that to our board, that it be included into the bylaws?
I think we have a motion by me, seconded by Frank.
Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye to
Aye.
Jack, and
Aye.
he'll record them. And we have an aye from Jack, and we have an aye from, was
Frank.
that Frank? Okay.
Aye. Frank.
And you have an aye from me, Jack, so you have a unanimous vote to send forward.
Will do. Good discussion.
Now, I believe that right at this minute's the only pressing thing on the bylaws we need to get accomplished, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think we've done everything.
Charlie, at some point, we're going to have to get in some detail about the dues and for states other than Washington and Illinois. But
We're going to get there, and we don't have anything about dues at either one of them. That comes with the affiliation agreements.
I understand, but I would prefer if we do have standing rules, if we break the bylaws into two parts, bylaws and standing rules, that be in standing rules rather than in the bylaws themselves. The idea being that I want the bylaws to be almost inviolate, very difficult to change, but the standing rules could be changed by the board. And so the board
Understand.
use as they see fit from time to time.
Yeah, Walt, on the dues, did you look at the document of evolving principles?
I haven't got to that yet.
Yeah, no, I think that goes to what he's talking about. It sounds like people didn't look at the material that was distributed in advance for the group. So maybe I think that should probably be carried over to another meeting so people can look at these things and see if they agree with them. But I think that evolving principles document tries to address the issues you're raising.
Yeah,
I think from my viewpoint, is that until we get some understanding of where Florida and maybe a couple of the other states are, or what they're willing to consider, not necessarily what they would approve, but what will they consider as far as this whole dues thing is concerned, I just don't feel comfortable that we can keep running down this road. I had hoped that at this meeting we would know where Florida stood. Okay, now I understand it's not going to be until sometime in February, which is fine. I'm not trying to rush it. But I also think that if Walt, from his viewpoint of talking with some of the other, I think we need to have, before we can move forward, we need to have an understanding of what are some of these other large states willing to do and under what arrangement that is going to provide the large income that we're obviously looking to get into NaCCRA. And sitting around with only subjective ideas doesn't, to me, make any sense until we have a better understanding of what are they willing to do and how are they willing to come up with it.
I can tell you right now, Florida is very supportive of NaCCRA, probably has been from day one the strongest supporter. It immediately jumped on the bandwagon of the individual from Florida and helped him with it. We had a very able guy from Maryland, one of the original three, and Maryland never really got behind him. We had an excellent individual from California, Frank Transu, and the state of California did not support him in near the fashion that Florida did Milt Brummer. I think the attitude in Florida still is we need and must have a strong national organization. And from the people I've talked to, and I'm fortunate that I live here and was able to talk to a lot, they're willing to do within reason what it takes to cause this to happen.
Charlie, I understand. We've done this before. All I'm suggesting is that before we start making any more recommendations to the board or something like that, that we have some hard information, and I'm assuming that you're looking to get that out of the board now that I guess you're meeting in early February, but that also there are ongoing discussions with some of the other states, or Walt speaking for Carolina, that will give us a sense of where we're going rather than sitting and talking about what's gone on in the past. We're looking to the future, and right at the moment, I'm looking at saying, okay, when you move from $500 to $5 a head, is the state willing to consider doing that and pushing it through in their own organization? So I'm looking for no way to communicate with these people.
Yeah,
Frank, I agree with you. I think I've had a conversation probably with Charlie. I thought it had gone with the whole group, but maybe it didn't. I think we've put out some sample agreements so that different states could get familiar with the idea. But we had to do Washington first because of what had happened there. I won't go through the history again, but we know Washington was urgent. So that's now pretty much in place. Florida must be next. I don't think we can do anything with any other state until we know where Florida comes down. If Florida is weak or bamby-pamby or says, yes, we support NaCCRA, but and we hope you guys do well, but we have our own structure and we're not going to really do anything to align more closely with you than we are now, then that would defeat the whole thing. So we need to hear from Florida where Florida's going. That has to be the next step before any other state. I mean, North Carolina is a strong membership state and has legislative history, but there's a rebellion going on in North Carolina, and that has to be addressed. And I think having dealt with Florida first will make it much easier to work with North Carolina, and then we can look at Virginia. Virginia is problematic because of some personalities there. I did get wind just this morning that there's a white paper on this circulating in Virginia. I haven't seen it. I don't know what's in it, but that's of interest. So they're beginning to have conversations. Connecticut presents its own set of problems because we have individual memberships in Connecticut, and so it'll take longer to work our way through that with those states. But I think that the very next state has to be Florida. If Florida takes 6 months or a year, then it'll be 6 months or a year before we make the next step.
I agree, Jack. Jack speaking, and I totally agree. And as Florida goes, so goes Illinois.
Yeah.
I think we're all looking at just exactly that, and we can waste an awful lot of time going back and forth, but until we get that information, as far as I'm concerned, I'm waiting for that.
This Walt, let me tell you about North Carolina. Our board meets in either late May or early June. And right now, if I were to have a vote in North Carolina, I think it would be very close to even. It may or may not pass. What I'm doing is preparing some white papers to go into our newsletter and other activities that try to inform people of what's going on. I'm going to propose, I think, I need to talk to Bennett and Charlie a little more about this, but $10 dues to NaCCRA. The fact that North Carolina man was early in and on and somewhat instrumental in the development of NaCCRA will help. I think it can be sold, but it will be approached in a manner that it would be effective for 2017 and not for 2016. And I think everybody ought to sort of plan on that we're going to really start this, make it effective in 2017. That's the date when we could get most of these states on board.
I think it's going to probably take 5 years to do it all the way, and there'll be a transition period. And in the meantime, NaCCRA has to begin to show some results. We can't spend all of our time having conversation about what goes in this document or that document. We have to have some results.
I thought we decided, this is Jack talking, I thought we decided this at the last meeting where the questions were asked, how many would you lose from Florida? And I think the answer was like 3,000, but we'll get them back real quick. And that stuck in my mind this whole period of time, and I don't think we've moved forward since then, because that's the way we were going to go in Illinois, and if we keep delaying, it'll be years. So I think Florida has to take the lead because it's got the most number of members, and whichever way that goes, I know Illinois will go that way. And Jack, you've also talked with David Curtis, communicated it that way also, has he not?
Yes, that's exactly right. And I think it's fortunate that you're in Florida now, Jack. I want to be sure that Charlie and Bennett are aware that you're there, so you might be able to attend that meeting that's coming up, if that's acceptable to the Florida leadership. That could be a great liaison between the NaCCRA board and the Florida group.
Sure, I know the board would be open to that because obviously we had Jack coming in November. Or Mr. Snyder, if you wanted, I mean, you're fairly close to Sarasota, Bradenton, I think, correct?
Yes.
You could, Pat Aarons, our president, lives in Bradenton, so even before the meeting, coordinating just a lunch or something, that's convenient for y'all, that would be good too, possibly.
Fine, send me that information and send my information to him, and it'll be done.
It's a lady.
Oh, okay. Fine.
Yep.
I find this latest information very interesting. I don't care how Florida goes. Every other state's going to go their same way, regardless. I can tell you right now, I think Florida's going to jump into this plan. It might take a while. They might do it on February the 18th. But that doesn't mean that North Carolina is going to do the same thing. It doesn't mean that Pennsylvania is going to do it. It doesn't mean that Massachusetts is going to do it. They're all going to do their own thing. And that's why it's so important that Jack was floating these affiliation agreements out to the states to give them an idea of what we were working on. Now, it's very gratifying to learn that Illinois is going to go the way Florida goes. So that, that gives us 2 states out of 50 already.
Well, what about Frank out in Washington? Didn't you imply the same thing?
Well, we may have to change the affiliation agreement and get them in line with Florida. See, they gonna already have one.
Hey,
May I suggest to you that still have the problem in Washington, even after the affiliation agreement. We haven't incorporated yet. We hopefully will be doing that during the month of February and March. And then we'll be relooking at exactly where are we going and what options are available to us. We could still back up in $500 and just become a member with $500.
Well, no, that's gone away. That's not going to exist here in a few days.
Well,
it's not going to be available.
It's not clear, Charlie. It's the idea is to phase it out, not to abandon it.
Well, we hadn't really decided on that, Jack.
Yeah, but so let's not pretend it is decided. I think Washington becomes a paradigm. There are a lot of things have been worked out in conversation with Washington. So we now have a model that people can look to, and if we then I tried to abstract from all these discussions a set of general principles. So I hope people will review the documentation that was sent out, and we can agree on that going forward. I mean, without people having read the Washington Agreement, without having read what's on the website and all, we've really probably gone as far as we can go today, because otherwise we're just going to have a conversation.
Okay, let me tell you what I want you to do. I want you to go on to the NaCCRA website, and I want you to read carefully the document that in the Resident Learning Center that calls the national titled the National Continuing Care Residents Association, and it has all the information about the dues and membership committee up to date, to include recordings of all the meetings. It also has a paper called Evolving Principles for State Affiliation Agreements. Very interesting. I was going to go over it, but since you haven't read it, I'll put that aside. Now, is Walt's 3 papers there also, Jack?
Well, there's a separate page, but it's linked.
Okay, I think I just got mine off of an email you sent me, but that's something they need to read also.
Yeah, the bylaws, the history of the bylaws committee and all that is there, and I'll include that in the write-up of today's meeting. I'll include all these links in the write-up today, so that people can spend a little time getting up to speed. The question is how soon you want to. Well,
I'd like to give everybody 2 weeks to get this done. Meet 2 weeks from today.
Okay, that's good. So I'll look at the calendar to see when they're.
Now, I think also if you can squeeze the time, it's very interesting to go back and listen to our previous meetings. I've listened to them twice now, and I know I'm a slow learner, and I've heard some things the second and third time I didn't hear the first time around. So that might help you a little bit. I don't think we have a rush. I still think this is a work in progress, and I don't know. I think it would be great if we could get it accomplished by 2017. But I'm like Jack. I think 5 years is going to be a quick delivery. One thing I want to mention: if all of you are going to the NaCCRA meeting in Washington, D.C., I've seen an email from the secretary recently that there's still some of those half-price rooms available. If you want them, you better get on to them. I keep sending my replacement information on him, and I guess he's not getting my emails because I don't hear anything back from him. So Bennett, can you make sure I've got the right email for Rodney?
Yes, his Hotmail email, yes. And I'm going to be dropping off the call in a second, but yes, I'll make sure.
Okay. Because, I've stayed in that hotel many times, and the cheapest I've ever had is $330, and $149 is a steal, I'll tell you.
Right.
Bennett, before you leave, is it possible to get the phone numbers of some of the people that are here in Washington? Most of us are on these systems at our CCRCs that are unlisted phones, and Pardon?
I'm not sure. You're asking for member phone numbers?
Yes.
In Washington State?
Yeah, and I can send you a list of the ones that I'd like to get. I need contact with some of these.
Yeah. And my understanding is last week, I don't know if they got to it, but my understanding is that last week the Washington board was going to talk about a protocol for that it would be released only to Sam Beard, and then he would determine who else receives it. So you might want to ask the executive committee what the final decision, if they came up to that.
The question really was, that's just basically with the names, but is it possible?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to. That's what I'm trying to. I'm not trying to. I'm trying to answer your question. The communication we've gotten is not to release phone numbers and emails except through one person, and the reason for that is just because of privacy issues. And it has nothing to do with you. This would be if it was anybody else asking that question. The Washington board, because I talked to them, I guess it was Tuesday last. Yeah.
Exactly. We are.
Yeah.
And my only question was, is it possible to get the telephone numbers in addition to the email addresses if Sam were to ask for them?
Oh, yeah. Yes, sorry. Then the answer is yes. If they gave them to us, then we have them, certainly, yes. Yeah, we track that as a...
They're on the app.
We track that. We track that as a field, yes.
Okay, that's all I was asking.
Sorry for the confusion. Sorry about the confusion. Yep.
Okay.
This is Jack. I've now looked at the calendar. So 2 weeks would be February 8th, 2 to 4. And I had one last suggestion for Charlie. Charlie recommended that we all re-listen to the recordings. I would suggest that if it's possible, we get the president, Bob Nicholson, to sit down and listen and familiarize himself with what's going on in this committee, because he is going off in his own direction and he's not having the benefit of the deliberation that we've been bringing to him. So, Charlie, if you can get him to listen and pay attention to this, that would be a tremendous help.
His president-elect may have more influence with him than I do.
I will give it a try.
Okay, I'll also try, but I have a feeling that once we got the president of the Washington group reasonably satisfied that we were going to do something, he lost interest in this committee. I don't know whether that's true or not, but that's the belief I have anyway.
Well, I think if he's president of the national organization, he's not the president of the Washington State organization.
But I believe that's where his interest lies.
Well, then that's a problem that we have. That's a problem. I'll just leave it at that. That's he's a national president.
Jack, the beauty of the camera is I could see your lips moving, but nothing was coming out.
I can tell you what's happening in Illinois and how it's going to affect NaCCRA. We have people asking us all the time, should I renew? Should I renew? And we've told them, just wait. It'll probably be combined into a combination NaCCRA and Illinois dues combination, because Illinois will not be selling NaCCRA separate from ILCRA. So we just got 40 residents in the state of Illinois this last week, and so we were somewhere in the vicinity of 200 now, although in the state of Illinois, and I imagine we'll drop 80 or 90 or 100 residents from Illinois because we can't tell them anything and won't tell them anything until we know what it is. We don't want to have a Washington problem because we said it. So I suggest we get something decided pretty quickly so we know what we can do, either whether it's a separate deal for Illinois or whatever. We want to be affiliated with NaCCRA, but we can only sell one organization. So it's the combined package or it's just the ILCRA package. You tell us what it's going to be.
Take a look at the NaCCRA. David was, he wanted to know what was going on in Washington, and we've shared that. And he and I have had some conversations. Maybe we can get it done. I mean, if you don't need to wait for Florida, or if you've got this urgency, then let's move it. Let's get it done.
Well, we'd certainly like to, and we talked in general terms, in which was said that Florida would only lose about 3,000 members, but they'd come back quickly. Mm-hmm. Whatever you think would be a fair deal and what Florida could go for, even though they haven't, that's the model to follow going forward. And
why don't you and David and I get on the phone together and hammer that out?
Okay. That would be good because, we're sort of in limbo.
Yeah,
we're not waiting to sign up new members for Illinois. The people that get hurt is NaCCRA because we're not selling two organizations, we're selling one.
Yeah, and we don't want that. So we'll cut through that. We'll do that this week.
One thing I can tell you, in my meeting with them on the 18th of February, I'm going to go with the premise that NaCCRA's cut of the dues is going to be $10. Now, once we get this thing going and we find out we can reduce that, we may want to reduce it, but I'm going to start out with $10 with everybody I talk to.
Well, let me say this. I think it would be good for us to put off our meeting next meeting until the 22nd, so we have some answer for what's happening in Florida. We can get away from all this speculation.
I'd favor leaving it, having it available for February 8th. We may decide we don't need the meeting, but let's earmark the time then, because it sounds like things in Illinois may be moving fast, and that may drive a need for us to have a meeting to discuss what develops with the Illinois group based on what Jack just said, Jack Snyder.
Well, what I hear from Jack is what we hear that happens 18th in Florida, and I think all of us would concur, rather than just all off in speculation as to what somebody wants. Let's hear what their thinking is, and we won't have that until the 22nd.
Yeah, but we weren't able to keep Washington waiting until the 22nd because of the circumstances in the state of Washington. We have a similar situation with Illinois, and we're going to we need to react expediently to the circumstances that people are facing on the ground. We set everything aside and focused on the state of Washington because of the need you guys had there. So if they have a similar need in Illinois, let's do the same thing.
I agree.
Well, if we think it's going to be $10, which is really more than we wanted, but I think it's negotiable, working with the $10 figure, and that does not include the newsletter, right?
Right, it does not include the newsletter, but it does include partners in management taking care of the membership.
Okay, well, that's good then. We got one place to send it. We'll send the money to Florida, and rebated to us. And that's, you know, it was a question whether it's going to be 5, 7, or 10. So if we're working on the $10 figure, let's move that forward.
Yeah, well, we also, Washington, though, for the second person in the household, only went with $5. Just a little.
Oh, yeah, that's true everywhere. The second person will be $5.
Yeah, okay. And the only other thing is, what do you do about lifetime members?
Lifetime members throw off an income stream equal to 10% of the lifetime dues. Every year you book, they throw off an income stream, so they get the same $10.
Well, 10% of 200 would be $20.
Yeah, but half of it goes to NaCCRA, so $10 would go back.
Well, I got you. Okay.
Well, I didn't say it very well. My brain is going to mush.
I can relate to that. And you're not even in Florida.
I'm not in New York either, and I'm mighty glad for that. I lived in New York a long time. I'm trying to picture 3 feet of snow on the city.
Oh, my God.
Anybody else for anything?
The Florida meeting is on the 18th. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct.
Oh, darn. I've got a all-day meeting scheduled on that here. So, but that won't stop me meeting with the lady in Sarasota before the meeting. I guess that would be okay. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. She would be glad to meet with you, and I'm not sure she even knows anything about this right now because she's been traveling out of state for about a month now. And, Jack, I would love to have you to visit me in my place. I'm about, I would say, from you in Inglewood, right?
Yes, I am.
I'm about an hour from Inglewood, up 75 to I-4 and over I-4 for about 25 miles. And I'm about 10 blocks,
Okay.
8 blocks off of I-4.
Right.
Sometimes we have a good lunch. You bring your wife up with you and we'll have lunch.
Okay. Send me your contact information, would you?
Beg your pardon?
Send me your contact information, jrsnader@gmail.
Get it done.
Okay.
Speaking of lunch, I've got to go get my lunch, so I'm gonna log off now.
Well, it's almost drinking time down here. Take care.
All right. Talk to all of you later. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.